Kicking off the list at number 10, Giganta. Dora Zuul made her first appearance in Wonder Woman Volume 2, Issue 126. She's a supersized villain. She's literally a giant, if her name didn't already tip you off for that. She was once suffering from a fatal blood disease, so in order to try and save herself, she attempted to transfer her life essence into the body of Wonder Woman, which I gotta say, great call. As far as vessels go, that's a pretty good one to use. Because Wonder Woman at this time was in a coma. She was being held at the experimental medical facility where Zuul was working, so it it was worth a shot. Now during this process, Wonder Girl came in and interrupted it, so instead Zuul's life essence was transferred into a giant test gorilla named Giganta. I can't even say that with a straight face. So instead, Zuul's life essence was now transferred into a giant test gorilla named Giganta. Oops. Now of course, this was a no-go, so her next idea was to transfer herself again, but this time to a strong circus lady named Olga. The transfer worked and Doris could now turn into a giant because Olga apparently could do so before. I think we're okay without giants. I think anything with giants we're just gonna keep out. If it doesn't have a cape, then no. That's it. Number 9, Psycho Pirate. Psycho Pirate. Charles Halstead made his first appearance in All-Star Comics issue 23. He first showed up in the golden age of comics. He was originally an employee of Rex Morgan, who ran a newspaper company called The Daily Career. He wanted more success, of course, so he made the alias Psycho Pirate, and he started to use emotions as a theme for crimes. That sounds intimidating, I think. So the Justice Society would solve crimes based on emotions. That doesn't sound too powerful for the DCEU. If anything, it sounds a little boring where we're heading now. The new Psycho Pirate came out in Superboy Volume 6, Issue 23, and he was much different. Roger Hayden can now control emotions, which is a big upgrade. Psycho Pirate is aware that the universes have changed, like he saw the nature of reality die and then get reborn, like New Crisis, Flashpoint, all that good stuff. He was just stuck in the universe watching it all fold and then unfold again. The reality created by Dr. Manhattan's timeline tampering had Roger as a member of the 20, a group of Metropolis citizens infected with Brainiac's psionic virus. So now Hayden can alter your emotions using the Medusa mask. He's getting better and better. The first mask was an artifact stolen from the Metropolis Museum of Art. That mask gave him godly abilities, and we see this in Superman Volume 3, Issue 24. Now the second mask used was from Batman Volume 3, and that mask was more of a tool to help him channel his own ability to change others' emotions. Medusa mask or Majora's mask? Which would you rather own? It's a close one. And before we continue on with this list, you know the drill. Go ahead and give us a thumbs up if you're loving this part 2, which you should be if you're still on board. Those likes surely add up and help us out here at the studio, so thank you so much. Now let's get right back to this list. Number 8, Super Doom. Coming from Earth 45, this Superman was a project gone wrong. He first appeared in Action Comics Volume 2, Issue 9, when Jimmy Olsen created a machine that turns thoughts into reality. All these thought machines and emotion machines, it's a bit odd, but I like it. So the gang decided to make a robot Superman next with that machine. They ended up selling this device to Overcorp, which made it into Superman: The Last Night of Tomorrow, aka the monstrous Super Doom. Overcorp used him to take over the planet, but still, that wasn't enough. Super Doom entered the bleed space, where he would then search the multiverse for its creators, destroying planets and other versions of Superman, like Optiman of Earth 36 and Superman of Earth 42. But eventually he came to Earth 23 and had to go toe-to-toe with their Superman, President Calvin Harris. I'm all for evil Supermans in a nightmare sequence, but Super Doom might be a little bit too much. I don't know. Number 7, Relic. Ancient enemy of the Green Lantern Corps, Relic made his first appearance in Green Lantern Volume 5, Issue 21. He's been around for a while, like before space-time. I'm talking like a while. Before all this, he was a scientist in his universe who believed that harnessing the emotional electromagnetic spectrum was a bad idea. He figured it would lead to tragedy, and given others on this list, I have to say, he was kind of onto something. So he thought all these other lightsmiths were drawing their power from a specific place, and eventually that place would run dry. Guy's a futurist, what can I say? So he searched the cosmos far and wide trying to prove his own theory, and he had universal support backing it. But nothing was jumping out at him. There was no solutions, he didn't really come across anything, until one by one the 7 core lightsmiths began losing their powers. The only living being left after that war was a lone green lightsmith. So Relic then passed to the next universe, and he was remade as a giant. kind of like Dor Azul. We love giants. He was first found by White Lantern Kyle Rayner in the Templar Guardians. But he didn't want what happened to the Lightsmiths to happen here, so he traveled to Oa, where he warned the Green Lantern Corps that they should surrender their power rings. And they of course were like, no, get out of here, peace. And then in turn, Relic forcefully drained their powers and destroyed their planet. Either one way or another, I guess it's happening. Okay, Relic, sure. Number 6, Voltum. Making his first appearance in Green Lantern Annual Volume 5, Issue 1, Voltum was an ancient force that had the ability to warp reality. Sweet. He was originally from Earth 15, and after his world was on the brink of destruction, so him and his mother used the newly discovered emotional electromagnetic spectrum, which is a multiversal force powered by all life in the multiverse, and then they used this power to create the travel lantern, and Voltum left to find safety while his mother stayed behind and unfortunately, in superhero fashion, died right as he left. This first lantern traveled for weeks through space and time in desperate hopes to find something to save his home. So he goes to Earth 17 and he uses the spectrum to resurrect plant life, which is cool, but then next he travels to Earth 47 and they use the spectrum to create beautiful music, also pretty cool. And then he went to Earth 3 where he met a sorcerer named Mordu, in which he creates a power ring out of a piece of his soul, that ring of course being called the Ring of Voltum. You're not going to name it after somebody else, so it's only fair. He finally found Earth 0 where he acted as the law and order. Eventually Voltum's mind was corrupted from the spectrum and he became insane. I feel like anybody who has a ring in general just ends up going insane. Like Lord of the Rings, it's like, come on. Number 5, Atrocitus. What a name! Okay, he must be a gentle soul. Atrocitus entered DC Comics back in Green Lantern Volume 4, Issue 25. He is the leader and founder of the Red Lantern Corps, the Red Power Ring fueled by nothing else but rage. So since the death of his family, he's been after the Guardians of the Universe. His family was residing in the ever so peaceful sector 666. Kronos, one of the Guardians of the Universe who I talked about in part 1, reprogrammed Manhunters to extinguish life. So when they all went nuts, this was one of the many worlds destroyed. He was one of the 5 survivors left on Sector 666, so together they became the 5 Inversions. They soon became known as the Empire of Tears, which sounds like a punk rock boy band, but in reality they were performing rituals to see the future, like the Blackest Night Prophecy and stuff like that. Atrocitus created the Red Lantern Corps, but he's also really known for corrupting Sinister. Number 4, Oblivion. Making his first appearance in Green Lantern New Guardians Annual Issue 2 back in 2014, Oblivion is made of Kyle Rayner's rage, fear, and anxiety, all rolled into one. Lovely. He's the physical form of all those traits, and he even believed himself to be Kyle Rayner. He stayed at this guy's apartment, and he even tricked Carol into thinking that he was the real deal. He has powers that allow him to shapeshift, obviously, but he can also teleport and project vast amounts of energy that match a White Lantern. He can also create illusions of objects and people. He can make anything he wants. You're going to be very confused if you go on a dinner date with this guy. One day, Oblivion teleported Carol and himself to Arizona, where he used his powers to change everybody's appearance, and he even changed buildings all around him. No thanks, we don't want any of that in the DCEU. Sounds fun, but sounds kinda unfixable. Number 3, Mongol. The insane ruler of Warworld. Yeah, he's for sure making this list. He first appeared back in the 80s in DC Comics Presents Issue 27. He was a Superman villain who was exiled into outer space by his own people. A man called the Archimandrite came along, took it over, and from that point on the planet was just a cruel wasteland. Mongol drifted through space, and over his cosmic commute he picked up immense powers along the way until he eventually arrived on the 5th planet of the Cygnus system, where the Martian race protected the Crystal Key. The Crystal Key was the only way to gain access to the planet Warworld. So Mongol kidnapped Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, and Steve Lombard in order to get Superman to punch those Martians out of the way. Martian Manhunter ended up freeing Superman's friends, but by the time everything was done, they were all so low energy that they still couldn't fight Mongol, so he got the key and teleported away. It took both Superman and Supergirl to destroy Warworld, but Mongol ended up escaping anyways. I think I like this guy, but he might be a bit too strong for the DCEU, but hey, never say never. Number 2, Kronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time, but if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and maybe you won't even get caught for that crime. Confused? That's what time does. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom Issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer. Now, he was a criminal his entire life, but finally he was arrested, thrown in the slammer where he had time to think. Maybe a bit too much time, because then he reflected on all of his past crimes and what he would have done differently had he planned it better. And he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop. So we learned about Crocs, time, anything, the mechanisms within them, all that good stuff. And when his sentence was up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used time-inspired weapons, like literally, he used an exploding hourglass or a wristwatch filled with blades instead of hands, and he also had a device that could literally slow down time. And then he started going by the new name Kronos. In the DC animated universe, he used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point, he tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's watchtower, but when he was interrupted, he made a break for it through a time vortex, but Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back through there. We mentioned a time guy on part 1, so part 2, we gotta throw another one in. It's the law. And finally, number 1, Grail. We finally got to see Darkseid in the Snyder Cut, but is it too soon perhaps if we meet his daughter? Am I asking for too much? I don't know. She's pretty badass. She made her comic book debut in Justice League Volume 2, Issue 40 back in 2015. She was born at the exact same time as Wonder Woman in Divergence Issue 1. The Amazonian assassin Marina gave birth to Grail in secret with help from Penelope and Menelipe. Marina had to defend her child because Penelope heard the prophecy from Menelipe, so apparently this child would cause mass destruction when she grew up. Okay, sure. Marina took Menelipe out, so she wasn't really a concern anymore, but afterwards Marina left Themyscira with her daughter, making it the first time Amazons have left the island. In Justice League Volume 2, Issue 40, Grail teamed up with the AntiMonitor and declared war on her own father. Nice. Being a hybrid of an Amazon and a new god, she's got powers from both. It's quite intimidating. She's destroyed Wonder Woman's bracelets with Omega beams, and she can travel through dimensions by locking onto those connected to the Speed Force. She can literally hitch a ride through time, so there's no winning this battle, either in the future or the past. Kicking off the list at number 10, Mr. Sinister. Dr. Nathaniel Essex made his first debut in Uncanny X-Men 221. Now, he's not that easy to forget once you take a glimpse at him, because he's kind of terrifying in every way. He's also obsessed with experimenting on mutants, and yes, that includes himself. He was obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution, but he felt like they were shackled by too many moral constraints. Doesn't that sound lovely? It's off the bat. He couldn't get funding from the Hellfire Club, so he got together a group that he named the Marauders, and then he got them to kidnap people off the streets of London so he can then experiment on them. So dark already, the guy is twisted. He even tried to experiment on his son, who was no longer alive. This guy may be a little bit too twisted for the MCU, but he does bring back dead characters, so maybe he's a blessing in disguise. Number 9, Blastar. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 62, Blastar once was the ruler of Balur, a planet in the negative zone. The inhabitants of said planet were not a fan of this horrible ruling, so they voted him off the island. They revolted and sent him adrift into the cosmos. Now, during that field trip in space, he bumped into Mr. Fantastic, who at that point was already on his way back to Earth with the Inhuman Triton. So Blastar followed them through the portal, teamed up with Sandman, and fought the Fantastic Four. He ended up losing this battle and was sent back to his own dimension, which sounds like a win, but this was only the beginning. He then became king once again, but this time he expanded his territory. It also helped that this time around he stole Annihilus's cosmic control rod. This guy is pretty hardcore, and at one point in the comics, he tried to collect all the Infinity Stones before Thanos. Somebody tell Blastar he's a little bit too late for the MCU. And before we continue on with this list, you know the drill. If you're loving the content, or if you want a part 3, or if you're just liking the curls so far, give us a thumbs up. It really helps us out quite a bit, and then in turn, we can give you back as much as we can. You're the best, thank you so much. Right back to this list. Number 8, Shadow King. Making his first appearance in X-Men 117, the Shadow King is a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness spawned by the first nightmare. Doesn't that sound nice already? Sick. Amal Farouk was the leader of the underground syndicate located in the Thieves' Quarter in Cairo, Egypt. He's a powerful mutant who also happens to be a vessel for said Shadow King. Farouk was able to control everybody around him. It's pretty terrifying. He feeds on the shadows of your soul. So yeah, with Marvel veering off into the cosmic side of things, maybe we could see a Shadow King whenever the X-Men come into the picture. Now in the comics, before World War II, Amal Farouk worked with Baron von Strucker to try and destabilize Britain's political structure. So maybe he's been there the whole time. I kind of hope he's not though, because he's terrifying. Number 7, the Fallen One. First appearing in Thanos issue 11, the Fallen One was once a herald of Galactus, who of course we mentioned in part 1. Now the difference between later heralds of Galactus, this Fallen One was empowered by dark energy instead of cosmic radiation, which was the norm. So in turn, he was quite cruel. He was evil enough that Galactus himself had to imprison him. The Fallen One was also a sneaky one. He would often escape and then re-attack Galactus all over again. It was a vicious circle until Star-Lord came in and imprisoned the Fallen One into the Klin, that prison we see in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now when the Klin was later destroyed during a conflict with Thanos and the Maker, the Fallen One again broke free, went back to Galactus, but this time Galactus teleported him back to Thanos. He's like, no, you go fight him, Mr. Crazy Guy, get out of here. Thanos ended up defeating him, but only because he tricked the Fallen One into igniting a gas giant. At this point, Thanos made him become a herald for himself, right? Might as well. The Fallen One can control black matter, which is a pretty big deal. He can use that matter to enhance his own speed, strength, durability, you name it. You wouldn't see him coming either, because he can travel at the same speed of light. Now, we just got Thanos out of the MCU, so let's never bring back his herald either. No thanks. Number 6, Spiral. Rita Wayward made her debut in Longshot issue 1. She's actually a loyal servant to the spineless Mojo that we mentioned in part 1 of this list. But it didn't always start that way, of course not. See, Ricochet Rita was once a professional stunt performer. She became friends with a guy named Longshot who was already from that Mojoverse. She was actually attacked by this insane version of herself called Spiral from the future. They fought, she won, and she thought that was the end of that problem. Now you gotta remember that, because it's for sure not the end. Rita actually decided to follow her heart and go back to that Mojoverse with her new boy toy, Longshot. And then when they get there, they're both captured by Mojo. Longshot's mind was wiped, now forgetting Rita, which is so sad already. But for Rita, it just gets worse. Mojo got his scientists to modify her mentally and physically, so now she has 6 arms, and her hair is also gray, and now, oh, she can also see other dimensions. She was like a twisted little version of Mojo, and she got trained in the dark arts of magic and body modification. And as you may have guessed, that future version of her was just that. Mojo sent her new and improved self to go back in time and attack her past self. It's just a nice loop of trouble. Number 5, Kid Omega. Quentin Quire made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134. He's been described as one of the most powerful telepaths right next to Jean Grey, and believe it or not, he was once also the host of the Phoenix Force. In his early super days, Quentin was one of Xavier's prize pupils, until he put together the Omega Gang. He wasn't always a bad kid though. It's just on his birthday, when he was still young, he received a call from his parents to say that he was adopted. And honestly, if I got that gift on my birthday, I'd probably turn evil too. I don't blame the kid. This Omega Gang likes to handle humans the way that they feel like, with violence and mutant monologues. He's been described as an Omega level telepath and telekinetic, so if mutants are too much for the MCU right now, Kid Omega surely won't be around for quite a while. Number 4, Overmind. First appearing in Fantastic Four issue 113, Overmind, aka Grom, was an Eternal born on the planet Young. He was a fierce gladiator whose job it was to prevent overpopulation. He conquered hundreds of worlds, he won thousands of fights, and he took out entire species. He's the champion of champions. Literally, the Eternals held the games to test everybody to see who the most powerful was, and Grom was the winner. He's the ultimate physical specimen of the Eternals, and part of me wants to meet him in the next Eternals movie, and part of me doesn't want to know what conquering planets and thousands of souls looks like either. Let's keep this guy in the books, definitely. Number 3, Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. When Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, they were all under fire, so they had to run and take cover in a nearby cave. Now the cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So just who is this Sidorak guy? And also, nice temple by the way. Sidorak is a powerful entity that is both a god and a demon. Best of both worlds, lovely. He was worshipped on Earth way back in the day, but was eventually banished to the Crimson Cosmos. Sidorak's gem contained all of its power, so when Kane stumbled across it and then decided to read the inscription, whoever touches this gem shall possess the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. Henceforth, you who read these words shall become forevermore a human juggernaut. And then Kane turned into just that. Now we have Ryan Reynolds coming over from the Foxverse into the MCU, and I doubt they would bring over such a high caliber character like Juggernaut as well. He might be a little bit too soon for that. He would literally rip the Avengers apart also. We see Doctor Strange summon the Crimson Bands of Sidorak in Infinity War while the team is fighting Thanos on Titan, so never say never. Number 2, Proteus. Kevin McTaggart was the son of Moira McTaggart and her husband Joseph. Now the marriage was the opposite of healthy. Joseph was a mentally and physically, and just an all-around horrible human being. So Moira got out of there. She didn't even tell Joseph that she was pregnant. The less he knows, the better, honestly. Just move on, get out of Dodge. So young Kevin and Moira soon lived together at her mutant research center off the coast of Scotland. Now Kevin, as he got older, manifested mutant abilities, so now he has this uncontrollable need for power. He craved it, literally. So Moira had to hide him. She had to keep him locked up in a cell for years and only referred to him as Mutant X, which is kind of a dark nickname already off the bat. I mean, sure, could have just still called him Kevin, but great. She wanted to keep him safe and also not have strangers get the soul sucked out of them on their way to work. So that's a bonus, keep him tucked below. But one day while Magneto was fighting the X-Men, Kevin's cell was damaged and he got out. Since the isosteric energy in his cell was no longer holding him back, Kevin was able to take down Polaris, Multiple Man, and he was even able to evade the Phoenix. But after doing so, his body began to burn out, just like Moira tried to prevent all this time. So now the only solution he has was to possess human hosts, one after another. He renamed himself Proteus, with his imagination the only thing that limits his powers. He's made of psionic energy, and he too can warp reality. Every time he possesses a new host, he gets stronger and stronger and stronger, until eventually the host burns out, and then he warps to possess another poor soul. And finally, number 1, Amora the Enchantress. She made her first debut back in Journey into Mystery issue 103, and her relationship with Thor is... honestly, I'd kind of love to see this in live action, but I feel like we're quite far from this type of power in the MCU. So half the time she wants to take out Thor, and the other half she's trying to take him out to dinner. It's really a love-hate relationship. Now, Amora has a pretty sweet life before all this. She's got multiple mansions throughout all the 9 realms, and can make gold and diamonds with her tears. So even on a bad day, she's still getting rich. She's really good at seducing people as well. I mean, it's literally her superpower. For example, Scourge, she would seduce him into helping her with evil plans, and he was like, oh yeah, you bet, anything for you, you're so hot, let's do it. And then afterwards, Amora wouldn't follow through with her side of the deal. She would just continue to play hard to get. She messes with your mind and your heart. That's a double whammy. One kiss is all it takes for her to completely own you and your soul. In the comics, she was sent by Odin to take out Jane Foster because the whole, loving on different worlds thing is long distance, I guess. That's a no-go for the God Squad. But when she tried to attack Jane, Thor intervened and she was banished to Earth by Odin, where she then joined the Masters of Evil. Now, she doesn't have too much experience with hand-to-hand combat because, well, she doesn't really need it. She just gets other lovers to fight her fights for her. The Bachelorette in space. Nice. Tune in. Love it. Kicking off the list at number 10, the Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, the Time Trapper comes from the far future. He actually prevented the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future using an iron curtain of time. He likes to hang out at his home located safely at the end of time. How neat is that? Kind of similar to Kang. In his first few issues, the Time Trapper was seeking the Concentrator, which was a weapon that draws energy, any energy source in the known universe, together. It's also a pretty big secret as well. The Time Trapper pretended to be the commissioner of the Science Police and tortured the Legionnaires, although they said it was a test in order to gain intel. Now, Lightning Lad knew something was fishy, so he cracked and spilled secrets, false ones of course. So this brought the team to actually figure out how to assemble the real Concentrator. And when an angry Time Trapper returned, he launched a plethora of Dark Stars at the crew, but luckily that Concentrator could absorb any energy source, like I said, so they were blasted out of existence. We're good. The Legion lived to tell the tale, but we just got Kang in the MCU, so I don't think we need another Time Lord showing up. My brain hurts enough already. Give us like 5 years and then bring in some more time stuff. Number 9, Eclipso. Making his first appearance in House of Secrets issue 61, Eclipso was made from God's spirit of wrath. He's the living embodiment of wrath. It doesn't get more menacing than that, folks. He was made to punish the wicked, to clean the world of evil, of course, until the Spectre replaced him. Wrath was driven by anger, whereas vengeance, that required more of a discerning hand. So what happened after was Wrath's physicality was trapped within an all-black diamond called the Heart of Darkness. The Heart of Darkness, kind of like the heart of the ocean, but instead of Rose tossing it overboard, a treasure hunter found it in Africa and accidentally split it into 1,000 pieces, and now we're all... Each of those pieces contained a shard of darkness. So Eclipso figured out a way to possess people through these diamonds, and that first man being possessed was Bruce Gordon. Bruce was a scientist specializing in solar energy, and while he was in a jungle observing a solar eclipse, a sorcerer named Mofir attacked him with one of those black diamonds, and after that, every eclipse, Eclipso would take over Bruce. Unbeknownst to Bruce though, Eclipso would soon learn to bind himself to anybody near any shard that happened to be angry at the time. Nowadays there's a lot of angry folks, so this is bad news. The entity of wrath possessing anybody who gets upset, that sounds, yeah, just smile and wave, I guess. Just lie and pretend you're happy, then you're good. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to spread the love and hit that thumbs up, it really does wonders for us at the channel. You guys are amazing. Thanks so much for watching. Let's keep this going. Number 8, Justice Lord Superman. Coming from the animated universe, the 2003 Justice League episode titled A Better World showed us one that's rather the opposite. This parallel universe showed Kal-El and the Justice Lord storming the White House after President Lex Luthor had just executed the Flash. Now the team of course wasn't too happy, so Batman and Wonder Woman fought off the Secret Service while Superman told Luthor that he's taken him in. Lex is insane, so he had a button ready that could literally start a nuclear war if it was pressed. And he's threatening Superman, saying that he needs to use deadly force if he wants to save the people. So Superman's like, okay, and then just eyes glow red, and then he turns them into ashes, just like that. And when Batman and Wonder Woman come back in, it's far too late. Superman just has a smile on his face, and Lex is just a pile of dust. Good times. After this, for the next 2 years, the Justice Lords would rule using violence like it was normal. They saw this and they're like, well, that certainly did the trick. Let's just keep doing that. Justice Lord Superman used his heat vision to wipe out all of Earth's criminals and villains. If we had him in the DCEU, the movie would be a lot shorter than 4 hours. It would be like 36 minutes. Snyder cut, maybe 44 minutes. Number 7, Superboy Prime, another super menace. First appearing in DC Comics Presents issue 87, this version of Supes has more powers and less weaknesses. I'm talking immunity to kryptonite and magic, which is a fantastic combo. He arrived to Earth and was soon discovered by Jerry and Naomi Kent while they were on a hike in a New England seacoast town. They named him Clark, although Clark Kent was the name of a popular comic book hero named Superman. So yeah, Superman already existed on this Earth, so Clark grew up and later attended a costume party at a beach and dressed like Superman. He went to get a glimpse of Halley's Comet and it was all a good time, and then all of a sudden a tidal wave hits, this portal opens up, and the Superman from the comics pops out. Now at the same time, young Clark's powers manifested and he quickly learned what to do with them in the moment. Superboy then followed that Superman back into the portal to an alternate reality, and he would never be the same again. Crisis on Infinite Earths was this multiversal catastrophe where parallel dimensions were being consumed by the AntiMonitor, who I'll talk about later. Superboy dove in, joined the fight, but was unable to prevent the destruction of his Earth. So Superboy Prime and other survivors escaped to a paradise dimension that Alexander Luthor Jr. offered. Using crystals, Superboy just relived happy times in this paradise, but eventually he got frustrated and shattered the barrier of reality. He literally punched everything apart. He retconned quite a bit in DC continuity. For example, he brought back Jason Todd, he combined Superman's origins, Doom Patrol was now rebooted, and we had numerous incarnations of Hawkman and the League of Superheroes. I feel like DC could use a big bad Superboy Prime punch to clear up the timeline, but hopefully the Flash movie does that, because this guy is just a little too crazy. Number 6, Brainiac. Another close rival of Superman's, Brainiac made his first appearance in Action Comics 242. This guy right off the bat is a very specific villain. He would love to steal cities. Yeah, watch out for your cities, keep them safe, put them under your mattress. He took Metropolis at one point. This guy's wild. He would use his shrinking ray, zoom, shrink your city, and then take them back to his planet. Vril Doc started his days as a scientist, and one day he successfully cloned himself because he needed an assistant, so who better to hire than yourself? He built the spaceship next and traveled to the cosmos, gaining knowledge and studying alien organisms with the help of his robot drones, and during these travels he came across Krypton while General Zod was still running the show. So of course, this dude shrunk down the entire city of Kandor and studied it in his ship. He made a remote scout unit that believed it was the original Vril Docs, and then it traveled to Earth and took over the body of sideshow mentalist Milton Fine, whose stage name was Brainiac. Now it makes sense. Number 5, Necron. Also known as the Lord of the Unliving. Great. Necron made his first appearance in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps issue 2. He's literally the embodiment of death. Necron figured out the land of the living existed after the death of an immortal caused a rift to open between dimensions. So Necron saw all of this life and he was like, this looks tasty. He wanted it. Well, really he wanted to master it and get out of his hell, his literal hell that he was living in. So he resurrected Kronos, even throwing in a classy army of the dead to assist in taking down the Guardians of the Universe. Taking them down ended up widening the rift, so it took all the Green Lantern Corps to stop them, but even after winning, countless lives were lost in this fight. Hal Jordan ended up going to the land of the unliving, accepting the possibility that he may just never return, and there he gathered the souls of other fallen lanterns, and it was just enough to fight off Necron and return, with the Guardians sealing the rift promptly afterwards. But like Necron says, you can never defeat death. Back in 2009, it was revealed Necron was behind the Black Lanterns and instigated the Blackest Night event. There he took over the bodies of Wonder Woman and Superman while also bringing back dead heroes to join his side. Number 4. Prometheus. Helmets are pretty important, especially in combat, and especially if one helmet in particular gave you the skills to beat, I don't know, Batman. Prometheus first appeared in New Year's Evil, Prometheus issue 1 back in the late 90s, and at first he was just the son of two criminals who traveled across the US, real Bonnie and Clyde style. But as a kid he would have to go with them, right, because they couldn't afford a babysitter. They were rich with like mob money, but they couldn't afford a babysitter. Okay, so eventually the police caught on and they were never seen again. The police killed them in front of the boy, almost like a darker Bruce Wayne origin. So he grew up with their fortune, only it was a stolen fortune. Then he traveled the world, trained as a fighter, trained as a mercenary. He learned a dozen different languages and he was pretty skilled by the end of it. Then he found the ancient city of Shambhala where their monks studied evil. They trusted him and showed him their greatest treasure, which was an alien ship. Not too bad. Their leader was actually an alien in disguise. He landed there, but Prometheus had to kill him to obtain the key to enter the Ghost Zone. The Ghost Zone was this infinite expanse of white emptiness, the space between dimensions. Kryptonians called this the Phantom Zone. And in there, Prometheus built himself a house, a costume, and his first advanced helmet that downloads info to take on the Justice League. He was great, like he shot Martian Manhunter so then he couldn't change, he infected Steel's armor with a virus, he hypnotized Huntress, and he hit Green Lantern with a neural shaft so his ring was useless. He also trapped Zoriel in said Ghost Zone and beat Batman with hand-to-hand combat. Not too shabby at all. Number 3. The Batman Who Laughs. We've seen quite a few Batman on screen. We're even seeing Michael Keaton return to Gotham in the next Flash movie, which is pretty exciting. But the Batman Who Laughs, aka The Darkest Knight, might be a bit too hardcore for the theaters. Coming from the Dark Multiverse, first appearing in Dark Days The Casting, created by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, comes a twisted Earth 22 version of the Batman Who Laughs. The Joker here is insane. He goes on this spree throughout Gotham, just chaos in the streets. He took out Jim Gordon, then he poisoned Batman. Was all bad, and then once Batman was able to move again after the poison had run its course, he broke the Joker's neck, which is already immediately so dark. But even the Joker was prepared after death. After that snap, he let out this toxic breath that let everybody near him get infected, including Batman. Cut to 2 days later, Batman and Superman are talking about what happened, and when Superman tells Bruce that a kid infected by Joker bit a doctor, Bruce ends up laughing, like this maniacal laugh. And he catches himself after, he's like, sorry about that. Superman knows something's off here, but a day later, Bruce called the team to the Batcave and went full-on Omni-Man. He took out the entire team before anybody caught on to his new and violent personality. Number 2. The AntiMonitor. Making his first appearance in Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 2, the AntiMonitor was DC's excuse to cut out a lot of fat from the comics, basically. The multiverse was introduced back in the 60s. The Golden Age heroes were residing on Earth 2, and then came Earth 3, and then so on and Danforth. So when Crisis on Infinite Earths came around, DC Comics introduced this big bad cosmic villain to set something straight going forward. Clean up the multiple timelines, makes sense. Now it all started when Kronos performed this experiment. They wanted to see the origin of the universe, but instead an opposite universe was created, the antimatter universe. AntiMonitor wanted nothing but death and destruction, and after battling his brother for, say, I don't know, 1 billion years, they both fell unconscious. And then 9 billion years later, they were woken up. When they tried to destroy Earth 1, many heroes lost their lives, and in order to stop that chaos, Superman had to punch them into a star. Who knows, with the Flash opening up the multiversal door, we could see him on the big screen in our lifetime. Maybe. Maybe. And finally, number 1, Perpetua. Of course, one of the most feared beings in the greater Omniverse. Also known as the First Creator, she made her first appearance in Justice League Volume 4, Issue 8. She was the mother of the Monitor, AntiMonitor, and World Folder. She was actually one of the hands that created the multiverse, literally. Each member were these celestial beings and they would pass on and their energy would return to the source, but Perpetua was different. She wanted a dark, vicious reality that would live forever. So she created the first iteration of the multiverse using negative crisis energies and then had 3 cosmic children. She was creating an army also to rule over the multiverse, so her children snitched. Yeah, they told the judges of the source, and Perpetua was locked away outside the source wall with her negative energies. But even locked away, she was able to connect to Lex Luthor, who believed freeing her would make him a hero on some multiversal scale. So next time you want to kick somebody out of your party, just banish them to the source wall with their negative energy. That's how he works. Kicking off the list at number 10, Matthew Malloy. While we're eagerly awaiting the arrival of mutants into the the MCU, there's quite a few mutants that I wouldn't want hanging out near Peter, Ned, or MJ, like Matthew Malloy, for example. See, Matthew was a regular Joe living in Charleston, South Carolina, but all of a sudden Earth gets hit with a Skrull invasion. Gotta love Mondays in the Marvel Universe. Sick. Things escalate when his wife Jules is vaporized by a blast from said Skrull ship, and his home was also just toast. Just a complete tragedy from the start. Now, one depressing, dark, lonely year later, he sees his late wife's sister, and they finally catch up. And it's hard for Matthew, of course, to talk about this stuff. This is still just a year ago, so it's all very fresh. So he's feeling it, and that's when his mutant powers decided to manifest. He erupted with energy, sadly also ending the life of Jules' sister. Not looking good so far. And then while he's standing there in shock, Maria Hill's hologram shows up out of a drone, and she's like, "Are you okay? Are you a mutant? What are your powers? What's going on? Do you have Geico?" He's a little stressed out on what's happening, so he freaks out a little more. So she sends in a strike team, and this just caused him to release even more energy and take even more lives. S.H.I.E.L.D. ended up sending in an airstrike, and that ended the lives of Cyclops, Magic, and Matthew, but those powers were better than we thought, because Matthew came back to life. Immortality for the win. Next, he teleported to the Jean Grey school, where he then took the life of Emma Frost. Now, Tempest at this point decided the only way to take care of this beyond Omega level threat was to go back in time and make sure his parents never meet. Then we can avoid having this supervillain from exploding over and over again. There's a link there, page 10. Mutants are cool and all, but this is evidence of how a regular guy can be riddled with tragedy in the Marvel Universe. Imagine if Zemo got these powers, Civil War would be over in like 22 minutes. Number 9, Molecule Man. Owen Reese started his days out as a small, puny, ridiculously looking laboratory technician whose life changed forever one day at work. Also, that's how the Watcher described him. I'm not being mean. He's breaking down his origins to the Fantastic Four, and he's low-key roasting the guy the entire time. It's pretty great. He was working for Acme Atomic Corp, but one day he got distracted and made a mistake while making adjustments to that atomic machine. He was distracted because he was monologuing about how much his life sucks. He was like, "Oh, I'm just a nobody wearing green pants at work, boo-hoo, no one knows my name." And then in the middle of his pity party, he gets blasted with energy, but somehow he survives. His boss of 12 years calls him in the office, and he's like, "Hey, I heard about your accident, Mr. whatever your name is. We can't have that happen here. You're fired." Which, first of all, as far as lawsuits go, could you imagine? But Owen doesn't pack up and leave. No, instead, he pulls out a wand that can control his powers, and he turns Boss Man into a snow cone. He can now control every molecule in the universe, and like Reed Richards says, if a man can control molecules, he can control anything. Guy's really brilliant with that groundbreaking assessment. Thanks, Reed. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it's a lot of dark, tragic stuff going on here, so let's brighten the mood a little bit by doing a little hitting that button. Thanks so much, you guys are the best. Back to this list. Number 8, Mad Jim Jaspers. Old Jimmy J, okay, he made his first appearance in Daredevil's number 7 back in 1983. He was created by Alan Davis and Alan Moore, and when he first hit the pages, he was a British politician serving as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was serving as a member of Parliament for Haslab West, and he wasn't a fan of superheroes either. He wanted to keep Britain safe, and superheroes crashing through buildings and punching each other in the back, no thanks. Sounds like the opposite of safety. They're old school, I get it. But he also wasn't alone. Many others agreed with him, and in turn, he won a general election. Only 2 issues after he's introduced, we find out he's a mutant with reality warping powers, who of course is also insane. He was just taking out other heroes so that he could rule secretly. Classic little twisty twist. He created and used this machine called the Fury, which hunted down superhumans. Meanwhile, he would be off committing crimes with his Alice in Wonderland themed gang. I know Disney loves crossovers, but I think this would be a little too weird. Number 7, Mephisto. In a list of villains too powerful for the MCU, clearly Mephisto is on that list. We thought he was going to be the one pulling the strings in WandaVision, but as the catchy theme song revealed, it was Agatha Harkness all along. Mephisto made his first full appearance in Silver Surfer issue 3, and he's been making deals with everybody since. Like when Spider-Man revealed his identity in the Civil War storyline, that led to a bullet striking Aunt May, so he offers Peter a deal while Aunt May is dying in the hospital. The world will forget Peter Parker is truly Spider-Man, but in turn Mephisto gets his marriage. It's kind of like Shrek 4, but way more fun. And this movie's probably gonna make way more money than Shrek 4. I mean, maybe, hopefully, I hope. You don't even need to be a superhero to have an eventful night with Mephisto either. Like in Journey into Mystery issue 627, he would show up to a random pub and he tells the bartender a story, and if you listen to his tale, he'll give you a nice fat tip. But if you slip up, things can get pretty ugly. Next time you get that really annoying regular at your bar, just think, it could literally be the devil and be a lot worse. Consider yourself lucky. Number 6, Vulcan. The younger brother of both Cyclops and Havoc, Gabriel Summers made his first appearance in X-Men Deadly Genesis. Before Catherine Summers even had a chance to give birth to the third child, he was transferred into an incubation accelerator, so he grew up real quick. After this, he was sent to Earth to work for Eric the Red, but luckily he didn't stick around to let that happen too long. He changed his name quickly from Gabriel to Kid Vulcan, which sounds way cooler already, but was also inspired by Roman mythology. I guess the other names already belong to DC characters. But Xavier eventually met him, and because of his mental powers, he knew that this boy was a relative to the Summers family. Vulcan had forgotten about his history at this point as well, but he suited up with Petra, Darwin, and Sway, and together they rescued the original X-Men. It wasn't easy though. Cyclops thought Vulcan had died when the island decided to fight back. Vulcan is an Omega level mutant, and he's also insane. What a jazzy combo. Vulcan can manipulate, absorb, and control energy. This includes Cyclops' optic blasts or even Adam Warlock's energy. And of course, interstellar flight makes those cosmic commutes nice and smooth. Number 5, Onslaught. Making his first debut in X-Men issue 15, Onslaught was a sentient psionic entity created from the minds of Charles Xavier and Magneto. So when the X-Men were fighting the Acolytes, Wolverine hit Magneto, and then in turn Magneto ripped the adamantium from his bones, which I've mentioned on other lists before because that's one of the more painful encounters I've ever seen in comic books. His healing factor then had to work overtime, and Xavier at this point decided it would be the right move to just shut Magneto's mind down, so then he made him catatonic. But during this exact moment, all of Magneto's lust for hate and violence leaked into Charles' subconscious, creating this new personality, Onslaught. Onslaught is quite lucky, because now he gets to tap into the psychic resources of the astral plane where he can manipulate matter and energy. I mean, let's get X-Men into the MCU first, and then we'll start talking about evil mashups and swaps. Number 4, Mojo. Making his first debut in Longshot issue 3, Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of TV entertainment for the universe. Just like the team over here at Top 10 Nerd, the more views he gets for this interdimensional TV show, the more powerful he gets as well. So if you didn't hit that like button, now you really have to. So in the 1992 issue titled Mojo's Media Madness, he had this wild storyline where Mojo gets Rogue, Cyclops, Beast, and Wolverine, and they all think that they're characters from The Wizard of Oz. It sounds fun, but for the MCU, this would be way too stupid, dare I say. The comic is crazy enough. I mean, we see his madness really unfold in X-Men issue 10. Mojo is a unique villain. He's part of a race called the Spineless Beings, and they're from a planet named after him called Mojo World inside of a pocket dimension called Mojoverse. It's just all about him, eh? Wow. So this race of spineless beings were also slowly going crazy over time because TV signals from other space-time continuums like ours were scattered into their timelines. He's a powerful sorcerer. We're not exactly sure just how far his magic can go. We'll stick to watching these guys on our TV rather than having them sucked into a interdimensional Netflix, you know? That sounds better. Number 3, Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17 and then making his first full appearance in X Factor issue 5, Apocalypse was born nearly 5,000 years ago at the edge of the Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt. He was abandoned by his tribe because of the fact that he looked different. He had the Blue Man Group avatar vibe going on, so they left the child. How mean. Later on, he was raised by the nomads with the idea that only the strong survive. So already such a tragic childhood. Now in the desert, along came Baal of the Crimson Sands, leader of the Sandstormers, and he saw this kid crying and he also saw potential, because clearly he was different. So he named him An-Sabanur, which translates to Morning Light. He grew up becoming the most feared in the land, and eventually Baal led him to Ramatut's time ship in an underground tomb. Now Baal didn't survive this cave expedition, but Nur was now determined to be anything but an abused worker. Now he wanted revenge on Ramatut, the pharaoh ruler. And after being thrown into a pit of snakes, Nur grew in size and strength, easily defeating all the guards before finally declaring himself Apocalypse. We had this guy already in the Foxverse, but it didn't feel too great. I think we should let that wound heal a bit before bringing him into the MCU with the X-Men. Maybe like 8 years, then we'll talk. Number 2, MODOK. Making its first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 93, MODOK was created by Dr. George Tarleton. He had worked with the team recently to create the Cosmic Cube, but the scientist supreme, Lyle Getz, figured the next logical step was figuring out a way to understand the powers inside said cube. We see this happen a little bit in the MCU. So enter Project MODOK, yes, spelled with a C at the end instead of a K. That's important, you gotta remember that. MODOK stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Computing. It sounds like a high-tech Siri, it sounds perfect. What a great way to analyze and probe this cosmic cube. So they grabbed that scientist George that I mentioned and altered him into this big-headed supercomputer. That's when things start to go south, obviously. With a brain too big for his body, they had to give him a hover chair, which is referred to as the Doomsday Chair. Already this is downhill. This scientist did not know that with great power comes great responsibility, so it wasn't long before MODOK overtook his masters, changed that last letter from a C to a K, making his new more suitable name for the list, MODOK, Mental Organism Designed Only for Killing. He's the big bad in the new Avengers game that's not too good, but it's still worth a play, and yes, he's as crazy as it sounds. And finally, number 1, Galactus. Wielder of the power cosmic, this one has to eat planets in order to survive. Yummy. We saw him in Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Well, I mean, we saw a cloud that sort of looked like him, I guess. Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. Let's talk about him. The Great Destroyer made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 48. He's the sole survivor of the 6th incarnation of the multiverse, but originally he was a humanoid named Galan, born on a previous version of Earth called Planet Ta. It was a paradise whose civilization was much more advanced than any other in the universe at the time, which sounds quite lovely. But when the cosmos were soon ending the embodiment of the 6th infinity, the sentience of the multiverse approached Galan and merged with him. So now Galactus resides in the 7th iteration of his universe, which is home to our Earth 616. He's extremely powerful. He once ate all the Infinity Stones, so maybe we'll just keep them hidden in case he's off his desk for now, just to be safe.
Coming in at number 10, we have Nebula, the adopted daughter of Thanos. While Nebula has always been a complex character with complicated motives no matter what version we're talking about, the Nebula of the comics had a much different role in the Infinity Saga than the one many are familiar with from the movies. In the original Infinity Gauntlet miniseries, Nebula was tortured by Thanos into becoming a half-dead, zombie-like creature, doomed to wander around Thanos' throne as punishment. However, when Thanos ascended to godhood and left his physical body after defeating much of the Marvel Universe's most powerful forces, Nebula found the strength to pull the gauntlet off of Thanos' arm and claim the power for herself. In her fury, she undid all of Thanos' actions, but nearly threatened to destroy the universe herself, before she was eventually defeated and had the gauntlet taken from her by Doctor Strange, Adam Warlock, and the Silver Surfer. Coming in at number 9, we have the Council of Reeds. While not commonly known as outright villains, the Council of Reeds have a complicated history with the Mr. Fantastic most commonly seen in Marvel Comics. A collection of Reed Richards from across the multiverse that have chosen to abandon their families and entire worlds behind in order to combine their intellect into one unified group, the Council of Reeds claim to do everything they do for the better of the multiverse, as their new home is in the expanse in between the different universes. All of this is possible due to the leaders of the Council of Reeds having taken the Infinity Gauntlets from their own realities and used them to create everything needed for their council to function. Incredibly smart but emotionally distant dudes with a trio of Infinity Gauntlets in their possession? What could possibly go wrong? Coming in at number 8, we have Magus, the arch enemy of Adam Warlock. Following the events of the original Infinity Gauntlet storyline, Adam Warlock separated his personality into a good and evil half, and in a twist that nobody could have seen coming, the evil half wound up getting out of control. Named Magus, this twisted version of Warlock used multiple cosmic cubes to launch a war against the Marvel Universe, creating evil doppelgangers to fight every superhero on the planet Earth. Magus eventually got his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet and was only able to be defeated after that point because Thanos had replaced the Soul Gem with a fake. Good job, Thanos. Totally makes up for all the other stuff you've done. Coming in at number 7, we have Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. In the alternate what-if reality of Earth 14154, Norman Osborn discovered the existence of the Infinity Gauntlet while serving as the leader of Hammer. Ordering several other villains to assassinate members of the Illuminati, Norman was able to assemble all of the Infinity Stones and granted himself the name of the Goblin King before attacking Asgard alongside his newly powered-up army of Dark Avengers. Standing victorious, the only thing left for Norman to do was, interestingly enough, try to work out his father issues, bringing his deceased dad forward in time to see all that he had accomplished. But when his father reacted with only horror at what Norman had done, Norman obliterated him from the timeline, unintentionally removing himself as well, because if there's one thing comic books love, it's weird, timey-wimey paradoxes. Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous Dr. Doom. On the alternate world of Earth 90-251, Victor Von Doom was able to hold on to the Beyonder's powers that he had briefly gained in the main Marvel universe during the Secret Wars crossover. With the strength of the Beyonder at his disposal, Doom was able to easily defeat an army of heroes assembled by Sue Storm, and was able to ascend to the level of godhood within this universe. Funnily enough, by the time he collected the Infinity Stones and the Gauntlet, he no longer even needed their strength. He simply wore the gauntlet as a trophy, showing that the former most powerful objects in the universe were now just trinkets to him. Coming in at number 5, we have the Ultimate Hulk. Now, while I personally believe the Hulk deserves to be called a hero more often than not, the version of Bruce Banner from the Ultimate Universe does have a nasty habit of going completely out of control on a more regular basis than the usual Marvel Universe. While imprisoned by S.H.I.E.L.D., the Hulk was visited by the Ultimate version of Kang the Conqueror, who gifted the Hulk 2 different Infinity Gauntlets capable of wielding the 8 stones of the Ultimate Universe, but at the moment only possessing 5 of them. Using the gauntlets, the Hulk was able to break free from his prison and bring the fight to the rest of the Ultimates team, showing that maybe locking up the Hulk isn't the greatest idea in the world. Coming in at number 4, we're hopping over to DC with Darkseid. That's right, the character that's often controversially compared to Thanos has actually wielded the Infinity Gauntlet himself during a particularly notable crossover. In the JLA/Avengers miniseries, important artifacts from both the Marvel and DC universe are spread throughout the multiverse and ordered to be collected by both the Avengers and the Justice League, with one of these artifacts, of course, being the Infinity Gauntlet. Unfortunately, its hiding place is on Darkseid's home of Apocalypse, and the evil ruler is already wearing the gauntlet. Luckily though, the Infinity Stones themselves wind up having no power in the DC universe, allowing the heroes an easier time in recovering the gauntlet, but the thought of Darkseid being allowed to take full control of the Infinity Stones is still an incredibly foreboding thought. Coming in at number 3, we have Ultron. In the Disney Plus series What If, Ultron is the final big bad of the first season, in an alternate universe where he's able to fulfill his plan of taking over Vision's body and uses the power of his single Infinity Stone to destroy this Earth's Avengers and cause a nuclear apocalypse. To make matters even worse, when this reality's Thanos arrives with the gauntlet and the other 5 Infinity Stones collected, Ultron is able to kill Thanos with ease and take the stones that he oh so kindly collected for him. This version of Ultron becomes so powerful that even the Watcher is forced to break his vow and form the Guardians of the Multiverse to stop him, as Ultron's ambitions have him beginning to conquer entire realities. Coming in at number 2, you know we can't have a list about the Infinity Gauntlet without giving Thanos a slot. And while the comic version of Thanos is obviously iconic and the main inspiration for all the various adaptations that would follow, my personal favorite version has to be the one from the MCU portrayed by Josh Brolin. This version of Thanos isn't lusting after death, but rather has gotten it stuck in his head that the only possible way to save the universe is to wipe out half the life in it. Thanos is obviously one of the more powerful villains in the entire Marvel multiverse, but the most chilling thing about the MCU version is just how calm and resigned to his task he is, especially in Infinity War. This is a guy that just wants to commit his cosmic genocide because he feels he has to, and then go settle down on a farm. And finally, coming in at our top spot, the one character more villainous than Thanos is Santa Claus. No, I'm not being a Scrooge. I love Christmas, but the Marvel Universe has actually had it that Santa Claus was briefly one of the most powerful villains to ever wield the Infinity Gauntlet. Following the disappearance of his reindeer, Santa asked the Avengers if he can borrow the Infinity Gauntlet in order to deliver all of his toys in one night. Unfortunately, this winds up being a bit too much for Santa to handle, and he goes mad with power, only finally being able to be stopped by a well-aimed snowball from Namor. It's debatable on whether this holiday one-off was a canon adventure or not, but at least now we always know that Thanos and Santa Claus have something in common.
Starting us off in at number 10, Vlad Plasmius. In the world of Danny Phantom, there exists a select few individuals with the ability to transition between a human form and a ghost form. One of these is Danny Fenton, the other is a female clone of him named Danny Fenton, but the third is probably the most important one, Vlad Plasmius, also known as Vlad Masters, Amity Park's mayor and Danny's dad's old college friend who's in love with his wife. Yeah, Vlad is secretly a human-ghost hybrid, actually the first to come into existence, following an accident that was caused by a college experiment that he was working on with Jack and Maddie, which are Danny's parents, in which Vlad gained his powers. Having been a half-ghost for the last 20 years, he serves as the main antagonist of the series, acting as just Danny's ultimate villain. But I mean, being a human-ghost hybrid and being the reason Danny Phantom goes dark in another timeline where his family's blown up is certainly worthy of getting him on this list. Plus, I love Danny Phantom. Butch, send me a pop figure, please. I couldn't find one.
Number 9. Haziral. Haziral is the demon who possesses the leader of the Rat Queens, Hannah. Hannah is an elven necromancer in the series whose very existence as well as the type of magic she practiced made her controversial while growing up. As such, she ends up making a pact with the demon Haziral to get access to magic so that she can pass her classes at Mage U. This prompts her to grow horns and also makes her indebted and permanently bonded to the demon. Using such dark magic has consequences, of course, and when she taps into it, it can cause Hannah to go kind of into a pretty crazy frenzy, losing control over herself as her darker side and the demon within her takes over. In Rat Queens, Hannah was prompted to use this power again to save her friends and fellow Rat Queens after years of resisting the temptation of said demonic power. Unfortunately, this also meant she would have to confront Haziral after years of staving off the demon's power and influence. In a way, Haziral is also like a symbol for Hannah's own inner demons, though he is himself literally a demon with his own wants and desires. Both a symbol and an actual demon. Mainly, he loves Hannah and he wants to continue to be as close to her at any cost. Which is obviously not very good for her, but Hannah also has a lot of shit that she needs to work out, so yeah.
And at 8, Dave. Dave's origin is unknown as of yet, but it is heavily inferred that he was like the other thousands of robots in this series, created by humans to serve a certain task. However, the robots became advanced enough to form their own conscious thoughts, so of course they revolted and killed off the entire human race. It was shown that Dave was one of the robots that served in combat and also helped fight off numerous alien races, and after the wars, robots seemed to act entirely like humans, adopting their culture and their way of life. Dave had a wife named Sally, who he actually later divorced because apparently even robot girlfriends are unbearable, and a son called Scotty. However, he is now a nobody working as an office drone, which only makes him more of a villain, despite being the protagonist of the story, because like, given that he wiped out the entire human race, I think it's safe to say that he's a villain.
Number 7. Scorpina. Scorpina was known for being one of Rita Repulsa's most capable enforcers in the television show Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and the same can be said for her comic book counterpart. In fact, I'd even say that Scorpina is a bit more ruthless in the comics, in my opinion. She ends up becoming a somewhat reluctant and sassy ally later on, but starts out as a strong and menacing villain to the Power Rangers. Scorpina is known for her determination, expert fighting skills, and her intelligence. She initially is presented as a major enemy for Tommy Oliver, the Green Ranger, as he struggles struggles to fight against Rita Repulsa's influence and hold over him. Scorpina would also go on to work alongside Lord Draken, the evil alternate future version of Tommy, and would later succeed him as the leader of his army.
And at 6, Death. We all love a good rendition of death, right? Of course we do, that's like the foundation of any good comic storyline. Well, in East of West, the whole story is about death, with this version of the Horseman being the protagonist of the series. And not only is he the Horseman of Death, but they're actually a horseman as well, considering how East of West is Wild West themed. However, this time around, Death, formerly of the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, fell in love with someone named Xyloan, something like that. I probably butchered it, but oh well. And then had a son with her, which is a whole other can of worms. Presumably killed by Bel Solomon of the Chosen though. He survived with the help of Wolf and Crow. Since then, the White Horseman embarked on a quest for revenge over his wife and son. And in the most recent incarnation, Death possessed skin that was jet black instead of the pure white skin that he has now. He was also the only horseman who didn't get a gender change in the new reincarnation. Alright, I mean it's Death, so Death is genderless. But I mean, he may be good in the story though, but I think it's safe to say that Death before this series was a pretty, well, like, death-loving guy. Self-love.
Number 5, Violator. Violator was always an indie villain that haunted my nightmares as a kid. Violator is the clown character with blue face paint from the Spawn film, who was played by John Leguizamo. I love John Leguizamo, but this role, wow. Also, John Leguizamo and everything is kind of wow, it's great. Not only did he crush it, but it also felt like he kind of crushed me and my soul under the terror of the Violator. The Violator in the comics is a Spawn villain who is one of the most powerful demons of hell. He often focuses on getting Spawn to use his necro powers, trying to get him sent back to hell to become Malabolgia's servant faster, but also serves to prepare Hellspawn for joining the army of Satan. Of course, that doesn't mean that he enjoys his job, and he often seeks to try and undermine his master. Violator is basically immortal as well. Despite dying many times, he's often reanimated shortly after in hell, only to return to torment Spawn some more. Yay.
And at 4, Nemesis. At the start of this series, the supervillain Nemesis destroys a building in Tokyo, killing a SWAT team and a police inspector. In Washington, D.C., the FBI informs Metro Police Chief Inspector Blake Morrow that Nemesis is targeting him next. Haha. Wonderful. He is given a card reading Black Morrow, March 12th at midnight, flatline still counts. Morrow has his family put in protective custody, and then Nemesis hijacks Air Force One over the District of Columbia, taking the United States president hostage and crashing the plane. Nemesis makes an international broadcast, revealing the president as a hostage in front of him, and then finishing it off by saying, "It's time you hail your new chief." Nemesis reveals to his henchman that his real name is Matt Anderson, and his father had committed suicide after Morrow tried to imprison him for hunting runaway teenagers with his rich friends. Bored of well behavior and less excitement, Anderson traveled around the world to learn the ways of crime, hoping to fulfill his mother's dying wish to have Morrow killed. So I think you can understand that this guy is pretty messed up and a powerful villain.
Number 3, Dracula. I think Dracula is a really important villain of Vampirella's to talk about, since he also just surprisingly married her. In Priest's Vampirella series, he had these two longtime enemies tie the knot recently, shaking things up completely. I know when I heard about this going down, I was like, what? Actually, a lot of Priest's run has been shaking up the status quo and the world of Vampirella in interesting, exciting, and of course, bloody ways. Of course, the version of Dracula we see in this series isn't the conventional one that you're used to seeing when it comes to Vampirella's comics. This version of Dracula is a reincarnation that is attempting to cheat fate by marrying Vampy, thereby altering his destiny and hopefully saving his life. For years in the comics though, Vampirella's nemesis Drac was often posed as the lord of a bunch of evil vampires, with all the vampires kind of coming from his blood lineage being corrupt in some way. It was like he only made bad vampires. That was like a whole thing. Dracula has also been shown in the past to be an exiled vampire from the planet Draculon, Vampirella's home world. Of course, Dynamite isn't the only publisher to feature Dracula. While we might be focusing on the Vampy version and his long history there, Dracula has also appeared throughout multiple different series spanning across various different publishers. And if you're like, man, but I already knew about Dracula, I don't know if you knew about his connection to Vampirella, but now you do! Yay!
Penultimately, in number 2, Overlord. A superpowered crime lord who operates out of Chicago, he is the archenemy of the Savage Dragon and the leader of Vicious Circle. There have been 3 people who had this mantle though: Antonio Seghetti, who I keep trying to call Antonio Spaghetti, Victor Nixon, and Flash Mercury. Antonio Seghetti grew up in Chicago around the time of Al Capone and became fascinated with the mafia way of life. When his sister was being in an alleyway, the 8-year-old Seghetti stabbed the man responsible and claimed his first victim. This act led to a life of crime, and he soon came under the wing of a man who would become Octopus, whilst also rising up through the ranks of the mafia. Once he had reached a position of authority in the mafia, Seghetti vowed that he would never lose his power, but his position came under threat when a superpowered freak became the dominant figures in Chicago's crime sector. Seeking resources and methods with which to cement his leadership position in Chicago, Seghetti forced alliances with the Nation of Lieberheim and cyberdata organizations, and as well became Overlord, because that's what you do.
Number 1, Lady Death. Because, you know, one comic book version of Death wasn't enough, so we had to do another one. Lady Death is one of the most powerful female supervillains out there, as she is literally the embodiment of death. And if you think you know about this Lady Death, you might not, because we're not talking about the one from Marvel. She hails from the Bad Girl comic days, where it was trendy for female characters to be bad, whether that be bad as anti-heroes, full-on heroes, or villains. In Lady Death's case, she was mainly known as a villain. She first debuted with Chaos Comics, but has changed publishers since her initial appearance with them. Lady Death originally was the beautiful and sexy woman who seduced Ernest Fairchild into becoming a full-on psychotic killer, who would later become known as Evil Ernie. As such, her first appearance was in Evil Ernie issue number 1 in the original black and white 1991 series. The Evil Ernie War of the Dead series finishes with Ernie managing to kill everyone on Earth in order to win Lady Death's favor. He does so by instigating an all-out nuclear war, ending the story with a mushroom cloud, and then ending the story again with a mushroom cloud of his face.
And in 10th Baron Blood, Lord John Falsworth was the youngest of 2 sons of Lord William Falsworth, one of the wealthiest members of the British aristocracy in late Victorian and Edwardian times. John left embittered when his older brother Montgomery inherited the title and the bulk of his estate upon William's death, shortly before World War I. Eventually, Falsworth sought the Castle Dracula in Romania in order to find and control the Dracula as a means of achieving immense wealth and power. However, Falsworth fell victim to Dracula's hypnotic powers because, you know, he's a vampire, and was turned into a vampire himself. Dracula bid Falsworth to return to England to wreak havoc upon the country that had repulsed him earlier. Although Falsworth's activities remained largely unrevealed during this time, at some point he again offered his services to the emerging fascist regime in Germany. That's right, folks. We gotta... can't really say it. German scientists performed painful experiments which enabled him to avoid his vulnerability to direct sunlight, and during World War II, German intelligence once again sent Falsworth to England to continue a new reign of terror. Wonderful. And at 9, Batman. Bruce Wayne died when the vigilante Batman was turned into a vampire. With now only one side of his dual life to take care of, the vampire haunts the nights, frightening and biting criminals. With most of the vampires being destroyed, Batman confronted Dracula and killed him by impaling the ancient vampire on a tree that was destroyed by lightning. However, the victory came at a cost, because during the fight Dracula successfully drained the last of Batman's blood, destroying his humanity. Nonetheless, Batman retained his sense of self and assured Alfred that only Bruce Wayne had died, the Batman will live on, and thanks to his new vampiric powers he would be able to protect Gotham City forever. Because, you know, immortality. Not only that though, but then Batman went on to turn the other Justice League members into vampires. Batman lost his supernatural companion of a vampirized Catwoman when she took a fatal crossbow bolt that was aimed at him. Overcome with rage over the death of the only person able to control his bloodlust, Batman killed the Joker and drained all his blood, which only led to more draining. And at 8, Zaris. Zaris is the son of Dracula. Angry with humanity, encroaching into vampire territory, and unhappy with his founder's leadership, Zaris created a secret alliance with the leaders of various vampire sects. The Claw sect, which was warriors, the Charnaputra sect, Mysticos sect, Nosferatu sect, Atlantean sect, the Moshka sect, and the Siren sect, all to overthrow his father. He accomplished this at the Centennial Meeting of the Vampires. Yeah, they have a meeting every 100 years. He and his allies drove stakes into Dracula and cut his head off, and his allies, like Mysticos, invented devices which cancelled the frequencies of light that were harmful to vampires. So Zaris decided to use these devices devices to create a new, more dominant place in the world for vampires. He gave these devices to his allies so they could stage a raid on Kriegersekt's fortress, eliminating their senior leadership. A vampire with devices that cancel out what the vampire's weaknesses are? No thanks. In at number 7, Harkon Volkihar. Lord Volkihar is actually the main antagonist of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim's DLC Dawnguard's main storyline. This vampire lord is not only a vampire, but he can also shapeshift into a vampire lord form that gives him a boost to all of his abilities and magics. Lord Volkihar once read a prophecy about a bow that could blot out the sun permanently, causing Skyrim to be a land free for vampires to roam. But to complete this prophecy, he needs Auriel's bow, which is technically also known as Akatosh's bow, since Auriel is just the elven name for Akatosh, and a daughter of Cold Harbor, which is a pure-blooded vampire made by the Daedric Lord Molag Bal after a, let's call it a ritual. This nearly came to fruition when you brought him both the bow and his own daughter before your final battle, so if you didn't end up winning, you'd be handing this vampiric lord everything he needs to take over Skyrim, so yeah, it's pretty messed up. And that's even if you don't become a vampire lord in the storyline, which you also can do. However, you end up still having to kill Harkon anyway, since he doesn't really need you anymore, etc. So yeah, pretty powerful dude, unless you have like a 100 archery skill. And at 6, The Flash. Barry Allen, aka The Flash, is one of the former heroes who turned into a bloodthirsty vampire after Batman spread the vampiric plague throughout the world of Earth 43. He confronts Wally West from a different world and attempts to kill him, however before he can succeed, he was killed by Roy Harper from his world, who shot him with wooden arrows in the back. Because, you know, it's like wooden stakes. But even if he went down easily, that does not mean he wasn't powerful, since, you know, a vampire with the powers of the Flash, and not just any Flash, but Barry Allen, the literal Speed Force himself, basically. Yeah, I don't think you really need to see why that's absolutely terrifying. If he hadn't have been killed by Roy, he would have wiped out humanity, and I think that's the reason why he had to be killed, so that didn't happen, because there is literally no way to defend against that, especially since Batman, the one who always has a plan to stop Justice League members, was the one who turned him, so there's no one really to fight him now. Halfway through into number 5, Morbius. First being introduced in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 in 1971, Dr. Michael Morbius was a scientist born in Greece who became a Nobel Prize winning biochemist. He suffered from a blood disease and developed an experimental treatment in an effort to cure it. Its side effects though turned him into a vampire adjacent who needs to consume blood in order to survive, and gain typical vampire characteristics such as an aversion to sunlight and the powers of flight, enhanced strength, speed, and a healing factor. His overall appearance changed as well. He gained fangs, his nose flattened to appear more bat-like, and his skin became extremely pale, like me. But he has less of a nose and sharper teeth. Additionally, the victims of his bite would turn into living vampires themselves, which is absolutely nuts. This character also made an appearance in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, which is literally my favorite thing in the world. However, since it was a kid's show, he couldn't consume blood, so instead he consumed plasma. And his origin was changed as well, so it could kind of be intertwined with Peter's, when he spliced his DNA with Peter Parker's using the neurogenic recombinator, and then a bat jumped in front of the ray. And at 4, Dracula. In Marvel Comics, Count Dracula is a centuries-old vampire, sorcerer, and Transylvanian nobleman who rules from his namesake fortress known as Castle Dracula. He is the supreme ruler and world's most powerful vampire. Originally the Wallachian ruler Vlad the Impaler, he turned himself into a vampire following a battle with the invading Ottoman Empire, seeking revenge to, you know, destroy his enemies, because of course. Driven by a lust for power, companionship, and blood, his centuries of undead existence have brought him into conflict with vampire hunters, other immortals, and in the modern age, superheroes. Dracula has a vast network of loyal servants, cultists, brides, and minions who regularly assist him and attempt to resurrect him if he actually ends up dying. Recently, Dracula and his followers have taken up refuge in Chernobyl, creating a new vampire nation and bringing him into conflict with the Avengers. But given that like he's in essence the original vampire, I feel like he deserves to be on this list. Also, in the Marvel universe, his name is Vlad, which just makes me think of Vlad Plasmius from Danny Phantom, and I love Danny Phantom, so Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Ultraman. Ultraman was turned into a vampire by Batman, which doesn't really make sense because he's a Kryptonian, so like without kryptonite fangs, how did Batman pierce his skin? But you know, whatever. Ultraman, along with many Supermen of the multiverse, were kidnapped by the Prophecy to steal their powers, but they were freed by the Justice Incarnate. Later on, Ultraman confronted Wally West from a different world along with the Flash and attempted to kill him, but Wally managed to knock him down with his super speed fist and hold him down with dozens of wooden stakes. And while he seemingly was defeated by those wooden stakes, I don't think you need an explanation as to why a Superman with vampire powers is a bad idea. Okay, that's horrifying. Although this does beg the question, does it cancel out like the whole sun powers thing, since like vampires are weak to sunlight but Superman uses the yellow sun to get his powers? Or is it just like that a Kryptonian vampire is double weak to a red sun? Because he's already double weak to a red sun, but does that mean that like he doesn't really have powers? I don't know. It's an interesting debate that I believe you should have in the comments, but respectfully. Can't believe I'm saying that, because no one's gonna listen. Who am I kidding? Penultimately, in at number 2, the Alpha Vampire. In the world of Supernatural, the Alpha Vampire was the very first vampire and basically father of all other vampires. He was one of the Alpha monsters captured and interrogated by Crowley and Castiel in their efforts to locate Purgatory. He escaped Crowley's prison though and set up a new nest in North Dakota, and then Montana. He was later tracked down for his blood for the weapon to defeat the Leviathans, and ultimately recognizing a common enemy, he actually gave the Winchesters his blood without a fight. During an attack on the British Men of Letters though, the Alpha Vampire was killed by Sam Winchester with the cult, like the demon cult that can for some reason kill literally everything. I don't know how, but whatever. The Alpha Vampire is first glimpsed briefly flashing in the minds of his children as it's commanding them to recruit more of his army in like season 6. Nothing is known about this particular monster aside from the fact that its messages can be heard by all other vampires, and he can also just knock them out if he wants to. Dean ends up seeing this vision while he is infected, but yeah, the daddy of all other vamps? That's a powerful boy. Finally, in at number 1, Varney. Varney was a human or Gigantopithecus sorcerer that once lived in like 10,000 BC. Varney served in the cult of the Darkholders under Thusla Doom. Injured due to the actions of King Kull of Volsia, a dying Varney was transformed into a vampire by sorcerers of the pre-cataclysmic Atlantis, because he was born in Atlantis. He allegedly was the last survivor among the vampires created in Atlantis before the Great Cataclysm, and ruled over Earth's vampires. But in 1459, tired of his ages-long existence, Varney chose Dracula as his successor and Lord of Earth's vampires, and imparted much of his supernatural power to him by forcing Dracula to drink his blood. Varney then committed suicide by exposing himself to direct sunlight. However, years later, Marie Laveau, desperate for vampire blood, had kidnapped Doctor Strange's friend Morgana Blessing and his brother Victor. Strange was about to deliver the spell page to Laveau when reason reasserted itself and he forever banished the page from Earth, basically. Laveau, possessing the Darkhold though, invoked a spell contained within for resurrecting the Lord of the Vampires. So yeah, the very first vampire of all time in the Marvel Universe, who killed himself with sunlight and then was resurrected, and also made Dracula. Yeah, that's a number 1 for sure. There's no contest, even from the Alpha Vamp. No way. And at 10, Hammerhead. Growing up, his father would berate him for speaking Italian in their Russian household and would beat the boy with a hammer when punishing him. So, you know, Father of the Year right there. I guess that's kind of how he got the name. In school, he would later lie and say that he was Italian, only for a bully named Rico to reveal his lie and then steal the hat he wore, showing the ugly scars on his head from frequent hammer blows. Rico and his girlfriend would be the kills that Hammerhead needed to join the mob though. Hammerhead convinced the mob that he was Italian, which was necessary since they didn't really accept inferior stock, as they would call it, and he eventually killed his father with a much bigger hammer than his father ever used on him. Poetic justice. When his head was shattered in a brawl though, Jonas Harrow discovered him in an alley and operated on him, replacing his broken skull with one made of steel, whereas some versions make this an adamantium head instead. He would later go on to get a full body robotic upgrade from Mr. Negative after being shot in the back of the head with a special bullet, which would have killed him. This is definitely some alpha energy.
Coming in at number 9, we have Crossbones. A genetically enhanced mercenary with a hazy past, Crossbones wandered
the world as an independent gun for hire until finally catching the attention of the villainous Red Skull. With proficiency in most forms of weapon known to man and a particular liking for stiletto blade enhanced gauntlets, Crossbones doesn't really have an ulterior motive or dreams of world domination, but rather will do whatever grisly task a supervillain is willing to pay him for, such as the time at the end of Civil War where he took advantage of the chaos and seemingly assassinated Captain America. Whatever the nasty job, Crossbones is willing to do it, and that's what makes him such a dangerous villain.
And at 8, Silvermane. As a teacher, Silvio Manfredi joined a criminal organization known as the Magia. With his cunning and superior fighting skills, Manfredi rose to the top of the Magia's ranks. He later became the head of a family, which in mob terms just meant a group of loyal members, not actually like related or anything. By creating gang wars, he increased the power of the Manfredi family, and in the process he also increased the power of the Magia as a whole, which pleased his superiors, obviously, because more power, it's more power. Manfredi also married a woman named Catherine and fathered a son, but when he was middle-aged, his hair became white, which led to the nickname that he grew to accept, Silvermane. Crime fighters Cloak and Dagger decided to take down Silvermane because of his role in illegal drug trafficking in New York City. Dagger attacked Silvermane and nearly killed him using her powers. However, doctors saved Silvermane's life by transporting his brain, most of his head, and other vital organs into a robotic body that would then provide him with superhuman strength, which is nuts and exactly why we shouldn't try and put our brains in robots. I've been saying this since this list. Don't do it.
Coming in at number 7, we have Boomerang. Originally hailing from Australia and given his identity as a stereotypical joke by an offshoot of Hydra, Boomerang has no actual superhuman abilities, just an incredibly gifted throwing arm that has been utilized over the years to throw more and more intricate high-tech boomerangs. Best known as a thorn in Spider-Man's side and one of the founding members of the superior foes of Spider-Man, Boomerang would eventually begin to have a change of heart after becoming Peter Parker's roommate and getting a bit too over his head with his relationship to the Kingpin. Nevertheless, Boomerang's incredible accuracy and the quality of his high-tech gadgets means that he's not a villain to underestimate.
And at 6, Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln was born and raised in Harlem, New York. He had a congenital disorder characterized by the complete absence of pigment in his skin, which made him an outcast among the children his age. He also had a problem with his vocal cords, making him speak in whispers. The only student who didn't ostracize Lincoln was aspiring reporter Joe Robinson, causing Lonnie to misconstrue this lack of hostility as a token of friendship. 8 years after their senior year, Tombstone had grown to become a mob enforcer in Philadelphia, where Robertson happened to work as a reporter. When Lincoln tried to kill crime boss Saulsy Montana, his employee witnessed the murder and contacted the newspaper where Robbie worked. Robbie was about to meet with Hipper when Tombstone killed him and arrived at their point of meeting, only to find Tombstone taunting him with the man's corpse. Tombstone let Robbie go though, just because they used to be friends, but later taunted him on the phone, prompting Robbie to flee with his wife back to New York, where he became an acclaimed reporter for the Daily Bugle. This dude is freaking messed up, and if you've seen him in like the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, that version's even freakier.
Coming in at number 5, we have Typhoid Mary. A very powerful mutant with multiple personality disorder, Mary is capable of telekinesis, telepathy, and manipulating fire when under the influence of her more violent Typhoid and Bloody Mary personas. Her transformations between personalities are so intense that even Daredevil was not able to tell after encountering 2 personalities that they were the same person, despite his increased senses supposedly being immune to her trickery. Despite being a mutant, Mary has most often fought with both Daredevil and Spider-Man, giving these street-level heroes a headache as they try to deal with multiple violent women in one deadly body.
And at 4, Kingpin. A crime boss is one thing. A crime boss that to the public is a well-respected philanthropist and businessman is something else. But this businessman is like 300 pounds of muscle. Wilson Fisk is an absolute madman who runs most of New York's and Las Vegas's criminal underworld. However, things get even more intense after his wife is killed, so he doesn't end up retiring, which he was actually going to do, but you know, then they killed his wife. After the murder of his wife, not only did he resume leadership of his former organization, but he also turned over his files on other criminal leaders to the law through the costumed crime fighter of Daredevil. Kingpin actually helped Daredevil, except now this time he had the motive of ridding himself of any and all rivals. The ploy actually worked though, and as a result of the evidence in the files, many crime leaders both inside and outside the Magia were convicted. In the ensuing power vacuum, the Kingpin rebuilt his coalition stronger than ever before. He moved on to control a great majority of non-Magia East Coast gangs dealing in conventional crimes, and the Kingpin's organization became stronger than any single Magia family in the New York area.
Coming in at number 3, we have Barracuda, the arch nemesis of the Punisher. An optimistic and smiling serial killer and gangster, the Barracuda is everything the Punisher stands against and more. Originally just hired by a larger criminal organization to assassinate Frank Castle, the Barracuda's rivalry with the Punisher became personal when their ensuing battle caused the Barracuda to lose both an eye and all the fingers on his right hand. The Barracuda might not have any superpowers himself, but his depravity and lust for violence are essentially unmatched, with multiple moments over the years that rank as some of Marvel's edgiest, such as snorting drugs off of a fresh human skull and engaging in literal cannibalism.
Penultimately, into number 2, the Hood. After seeing Electro fight Daredevil as a child, the life of a supervillain really enticed Parker Robbins. With a mother in need of constant medical care, he soon dropped out of high school to steal money to give her better care. His cousin John told him about some valuable material perfect to steal at a nearby warehouse, and together, they broke into it. They were about to leave when they were attacked by a demon in a cloak. Peter shot the being and assumed that he had killed it, but not wanting to leave empty-handed, he took the cloak and the boots. For some reason, I don't know why you thought you were gonna get any money for it, but whatever. On the way home, he was jumped for his shoes and used the boots to escape. And upon finding out that the boots actually gave him the ability to walk on air, he took the cloak over to John's apartment where he found out that the cloak gave him powers as well, originating from the demon Dormammu, though he didn't know it at the time. A dude with a cloak and boots giving him a fraction of the powers of Dormammu? Yeah, that's a number 2 for me. Pun intended now.
And coming in at our top spot, we've got to go with the classic Daredevil villain, Bullseye. An incredibly skilled assassin with nearly perfect accuracy, Bullseye ranks as one of the greatest villains that heroes like Spider-Man and Daredevil have ever had to face. Bullseye was responsible for the death of Elektra and appears to have zero regard for life or any sense of moral goodness, with even other members of the Dark Avengers being disgusted at his lust for murder when he was briefly a member of their team. While Bullseye often finds himself under the employ of characters such as the Kingpin or Norman Osborn, his rather unique powers and his complete lack of empathy make him potentially the most deadly street-level villain of all.